Welcome to another episode of the Vet Spec. Tonight with us, we have Charlie, a longtime member of the Legion Post 108, where we're hosting again.
Keep on your mic.
So, welcome, Charlie. I'll
Rich.
give you a
Appreciate
brief, a little time to give you an overview of your career, and then we'll just kind of get into, we can go from chronological or whatever you want to talk about.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much, and thank you for what you're doing with this project. I think it's a great thing to get veterans together and have veterans listen to other veterans' experiences and get that context. I've often said here at the Legion, we have kind of a thing with the one corner there, which is all the old timers sit around on a daily basis, right? And I've often thought about the fact that, geez, if I only had a microphone,
Right.
I mean, if I only had a way of recording all this, hiding it in a flower pot or something down there and get those guys to tell those stories. And the good news is that those stories are told over and over and over.
Yeah.
So we can get it almost any time. But I appreciate the effort on this.
Well, thank you. It's been fun for me and a good thing for me. So, so a little brief overview of your career. Obviously, you were served in the Navy.
I did. I'm retired Navy, and I'll give you the Reader's Digest version as best I can. But it was a long career, and it actually turned into two careers. But and my age brings us back many decades. So this whole thing started in 1969. And like many people back during the Vietnam era, it started with the late entry program, and so I actually joined the Navy when I was in high school and stuff, and that was kind of a big thing back then. I graduated from high school in 1969, and I was scheduled to go to boot camp, I think like later in the fall or something like that.
Well, time off.
Yeah, and it was one of those deals where I don't think I was. I graduated like 2 days, and I got a call from my recruiter in Alexandria, Minnesota. He said, "How about leaving like in 2 weeks?" And I said, "All right, fine."
Whatever.
I was ready to go.
Yeah.
So I went on active duty in July of 1969. Did camp in San Diego, and the whole thing began. At that time, now, in today's environment, everybody is so concerned about what school am I going to get, what kind of training am I going to get, and they've got these school guarantees and stuff. At that time in the Navy, you got to remember 1969, that was also the era of the draft.
Yeah.
Okay, so they didn't have to promise me, right? And my draft number was fairly high, but I was enlisting in it. So there were 3 guarantees that you could get when you went in back then. That was seaman, or what they call the black shoe Navy, and that's just regular over the waves kind of Navy.
Okay.
Aviation, Airedale, and then construction battalion. And construction battalion was very difficult to get back then.
Really?
Yeah, and the funny part about it is that the Navy Seabees at that time, if you went into the Navy Seabees, you were going to Vietnam.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you volunteered to be a Navy Seabee, you were going. But it was also all of the really good training jobs, heavy equipment operator, construction, and electrician and stuff like that. So there were guys about it. But I wanted to be a jet mechanic.
That's how I was in the Army.
We'll get to that part in a minute. But I wanted to be a jet mechanic, and so aviation was the only guarantee that I could get. July, I took off for San Diego and did my, I want to say it was 11 weeks of boot camp or something like that. I can't remember exactly how long it was. And then the training track from after boot camp was they sent you to Navy, what they call A schools, primary schools. In the Navy, we call them ratings. In the Army, they call them MOS.
Yep.
And it's the same kind of a thing in the Navy. We just have a different name for it. And all of the aviation schools at that time were in Memphis, Tennessee. So when I graduated from boot camp, I got orders to Memphis, Tennessee. great, I'm going to be a jet mechanic. Super, I got my school. Not knowing that's not exactly how the Navy works. So came home on leave and did a 2 weeks leave, and then ended up in Memphis, Tennessee. And during the orientation part for Memphis, they then they tell you exactly what your job is going to be. And I remember going into a little room. There was a master chief in there. They were God. We never actually talked to a master chief until then. There was this master chief in there, and there was like 20 of us in there standing at attention in this office building, and he was giving everybody their orders, and then he read off like 4 names, and I was one of them. And he said, "You guys stand fast." He said, "The rest of you are dismissed." So before I read off, you guys stand fast. And then he stood in front of us and he goes, "All right," he says, "Here's the deal." He said, "You guys get a choice between, so you can be an aviation electrician's mate, aviation electronics technician, aviation fire control technician, an aviation anti-submarine warfare technician, or an aviation anti-submarine warfare operator." And he said it, and I went, and the last one, I didn't know what he said, but it sounded like one word to me. I'd never heard the term before. But all of them were electronics and electrician stuff. I remember having this short conversation with this master chief, and I said, "I wanted to be a jet mechanic." And he looked at me and he says, "You can't do that. You're too smart for that. You got to take one of these." And it's the first time in my life that anybody had ever told me I was too smart to do something. I had pretty much gone through high school understanding that I was a rock, and that was I was a C or D student.
Did they have the ASVAB back then?
ASVAB, yeah. And
So how'd you score on that?
I think mine was the ASVAB 1.5 or something. Now they're up to like the ASVAB 43.
No idea what it is.
And I think they called it the ASVAB, but and I think this is service-wide, but back then, around that time frame, they called it the basic VAB.
Okay.
And that was the precursor to the ASVAB, but it was essentially the same thing. And that's where they determined, the Department of Defense determined your vocation, what you were going to do for a living, is the results of that. So it was kind of like a vocational IQ test. That's what the ASVAB test. And that's where they did. Well, when I was in high school, I did model airplanes for a hobby. I did ham radio for a hobby. I was working on getting my Class C broadcast license and stuff. So I aced all of the electronic stuff, all of the other stuff. The important stuff to the military. I aced all that stuff, and that's how I ended up with it.
So did you end up choosing one of those? Did you just talk your way into
like I said, he gave it this, and I only had those 5 to choose from. But the last one I never heard before, and so I asked him. I said, "Well, I really don't want to do those first 4." But I said, "What was that last one?" I said, "Oh, God, hold on." He said, "It's an aviation anti-submarine warfare operator." I said, "I don't know too much about it." I said, "What is it?" And he said, "I don't know. I'm not really sure, but I guess you fly around in airplanes and get $55 a month extra for hazardous duty pay." Now, at the time, I was getting $123 a month in base pay.
Right.
He's talking about giving me another $55 a month. That was a lot of money back then.
Right.
And I kind of went, "I'll take that."
45% increase there a month.
So that's how I got into my what we call a rate in the Navy. My rate in the Navy was Aviation Anti-Submarine Warfare Operator, or AW. They have AWs today in the Navy, but they are no longer called that. The AWs today are now called Aviation Special Electronic Warfare.
Not anti-submarine.
Yeah, because the anti-submarine warfare mission is kind of outlined a whole different aircraft, a different mission set and stuff. And the AWs of today's Navy are much more a jack of all trades. They do different electronic systems in like the P-8s, which are 737s that they fly for surveillance and stuff now, helicopter stuff, search and rescue and wet swimmer. The guys in helicopters that jump out and pull pilots out of the water and stuff. That's what my rate Navy evolved into.
Okay.
So I went through that in Memphis, and I went through the initial school, and they don't do type aircraft. They only train you to be, at the time, they trained us to be either the acoustic operators that listen, airborne sonar operators, or the non-acoustic operators that operate the rest of the year, things like electronic countermeasures, radar, those kind of things. So there was two halves to the rate that's no longer true. And then from there, then we had to go on to a secondary school, and that's where you were ordered into a type aircraft. And I went to, and so now we're talking like the early 1970s, 70, 71, and I went to San Diego. And I began training in two trackers.
Is that some of the pictures, bro?
Yep. Okay. Yep.
We'll throw them up in the
and again now, so this was the Vietnam Wars. So my first enlistment was 1969 to 1973. And the end of the Vietnam War was 1975. And for my part, I did 3 tours in Vietnam, 2 tours off the ship in Tonkin Gulf on USS Ticonderoga, and I had 48 combat missions off Ticonderoga in the Tonkin Gulf. And then I did 1 tour in country in Da Nang at the end of my first tour. And that was a different kind of a tour. We were flying mail and cargo and passengers out of Da Nang, and we were flying them to and from carriers on the line. So I had a lot of flight hours, but we were based in Da Nang, so I did an in-country tour. And at the end of that, in July of 1973, the end of my 4 years, I had had enough of the Navy, and I decided that I was going to take part in the Vietnam GI Bill. I was going to come back to Minnesota and go to school. And I did that until it went south. And after a couple of years, I decided that the Navy BS was actually a lot better than Mankato's college.
College.
Yeah, there were 2 different versions of BS, and I preferred the Navy.
Yeah.
So in 1975, I went back in the Navy under a program called NAVVET, which the Navy at that time took Navy veterans back on active duty. And also had another program called OSVET, which is other service veterans. So Army, whatever, good join as well. But I went back to the Navy with, this time for my second tour, with a guarantee that I was going to get the new aircraft type, the replacement for the Grumman S2 tracker, which was the Lockheed S3 Viking, and that was the latest and greatest whiz bang stuff. I mean,
highest tech stuff.
It was, at the time, it was the highest tech stuff that the Navy had. And so I ended up going back in the Navy and getting orders to the East Coast. At the same time, I got married. My girlfriend and I went back in the Navy with me in Jacksonville, Florida. And I spent the remainder of my career more or less in that community. With a couple of exceptions, but I ended up flying S3 Vikings from 1975 until about 1989, and I've got 1,600 hours in ejection seats, over 250 arrested landings and catapult shots off of aircraft in just that aircraft alone. I have over 450 arrested landings in aircraft here. So it got to be kind of a regular thing.
Yeah, get used to it.
Well, it's one of those things that's still an e-ticket ride. I mean, it's an exciting part of naval aviation, and is the best and brightest that get to do that stuff. And the pilots that do that are the best in the world. Landing and taking off of an aircraft carrier is pinnacle of what you do in aviation. So it was a lot of fun.
Good target going for whatever you're at.
Yeah, my airfield moved at about 30 knots in heavy seas and bounced up and down, and it was only about 150 feet wide and about 400 feet long. So
How hot you come in?
yeah. What's that?
On approach, how fast with the rescue?
It depends by the aircraft that you're in, but our approach speed was around about 110 knots or so. The approach speed of an F-14 is around 130 knots, and an F-18 is a little hot, which is basically the only thing that's on carriers nowadays. But an F-18's approach speed is somewhere around 135 to 138 knots, but it's different today than it was back then. Most of the landing, not all, but most of the landing process for an F-18 is automated. Okay, so it's a data link between the ship and the aircraft, and it's not hands off, but the airplane basically flies the approach itself, and the pilot is much more of a passenger than what they used to be. Now, that technology, the first aircraft that initial technology was put in was the Lockheed S-3 Viking.
Oh, okay.
They call them Mode 4 approaches. I'm not going to do technical stuff.
Nah.
They call it Mode 4 approaches, which was basically latching up the automatic pilot to the aircraft.
Yeah.
So you're basically, the aircraft is an automatic pilot, but the ship takes over through a data link. The ship takes over that automatic pilot and flies the approach for you. When we did that in the S3, it was much more nerve-wracking flying the approach yourself. Seeing the pilot flying the approach like this with his hand above the throttle and his hand just near the stick in case something was wrong. No, that's the S3.
Oh, that's it.
Okay, so for the F-18s, they have a different system. It accomplishes the same thing with the electronics equipment, and they call it, I can't remember the name of what they call it. I'll probably remember it about 45 minutes. But the F-18s have a different way of deploying nowadays. If that system is down on the aircraft before launch, they're down. They don't fly. So they almost have to have it. They can land manually, but the trouble is that those pilots, those air crews, are not trained to that. So no, they aren't. So that's kind of a required system.
Yeah.
Getting them on board without it is, I understand it's kind of a hairy deal. But anyway, so I did the, so I flew the Viking. I was the first enlisted air crew. I was the first enlisted double centurion on the USS Nimitz. So I was the first enlisted guy with over 200 arrested landings on the USS Nimitz.
Nice. So is there a record?
Well, it's just
It's one of those fun stats you get.
one of those fun stats that you get to give out. And we flew a lot. And there was also, and it was very much an exciting lifestyle and exciting vocation, but there were also those bad days.
Yeah.
You know, we had, I spent 2 tours VS-24 in one squadron, which was roughly about 7 years. 7 years, I went to 9 years, several friends. So it's a dangerous business. It's not a good thing. So I did that. In the middle of that, in between those tours with the Viking, I did in 1979 until 1982, I did a tour on recruiting duty. So 3 years on recruiting duty in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I often tell people it was the longest 7 years of my life.
Bet it was. Everybody I talked to was the recruiting.
And it pretty much ruined my Navy career.
Really?
But you know what? You can't. you can't look at that. It's just part of what I did. I think I probably would have advanced further without that recruiting experience. In 21 years in the Navy, I think I probably would have been 8 or 9. But you can't look at your career in the rearview mirror like that. You have to accept it. Couldn't get out of recruiting fast enough, and they were going to send me back to S3s, and I went, I'll take it. Yeah. So my wife and I moved back to Jacksonville, Florida, and I did about another 9 years back there. The final thing in the Navy was in 1989. I was all done with the S3 stuff. Quite frankly, the S3 was beginning to be boring to me.
Oh yeah.
Because we had something added to our aircraft that none of us liked, and that was a tanker package. So we ended up being the gas tank for F/A-18s,
Really?
for the lawn darts of the attack and fighter community, and that was terrible flight. I hated it. I absolutely hated
What made it so bad?
it. It was just doing
Okay.
doing ovals up above the ship,
Just waiting for somebody
waiting
to-
for F/A-18s to come and plug in, and then you go down and get more gas and come back up and do the same thing. It's just boring.
Yeah.
So I did. So I finished up the S3 thing in 1989, and I knew that my Navy career was closing on down. And the last thing that was offered to me, you'll love this. The last thing that was offered to me was a 3-year tour in Bermuda.
Oh.
A company tour. So called my wife on the phone in Jacksonville, and I said, how about for a final tour? How about the 3 years in Bermuda? She said, okay.
Well, 10 years. Yeah.
So I did 3 years in Bermuda, and I retired in 1992. When I got out of the Navy in '92, the whole Mankato State College thing was something in my rearview mirror, and I thought, okay, I'm gonna do this. So at like 39, was it 39 years old, 40 years old, or something like that, I went back to school at Mankato State University at Mankato, and I finished my degree in computer science and criminal justice minor.
So that was 89-ish?
And no, that was so I graduated in '95 from Mankato State. Got my bachelor's degree, and I spent just a few years in computer science. I was an AS400 technician. I got a job with Nicholas as the AS400 technician in Nicollet County. And about 3 years after I got there, the assistant county service officer over there decided to retire. And right after the big tornado, 99, around 99.
That spots really matter.
Yeah.
I don't even know if they die in or.
Yeah. We're almost to our 30 minutes. They just weren't read. Oh, yours is still going too. I'm not sure how you include that in.
That hole that we're in right there.
No.
And then right after we were done with Christian, he was just like,
I don't know why. I didn't even attempt.
and we were walking down the trail and I was like, walking along and I looked up and I thought they were charging all every time.
Yeah, that's the quickest one of the batteries turn out.
Yeah, I think there's one that's.
So then you do post processing, then you're recording it two
Yeah.
views, and then you kind of do
Well,
processing.
I'm just uploading these to, or trying to get them to a hard drive, and then maybe pull some clips. I don't know yet. Like that part is
still
hard.
playing with that. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, we have, this is what we're going to use because it's got a little bit of background noise and that. I have no idea yet. And it's tough to, I haven't been able to sit down at a computer to Do it. What's up?
And ask if you want to sit down too.
We're just
So we were got into the backyard fisheries and I broke my legs around and tying my line and I look over.
we're back.
Hold on.
We're back.
Not yet. Now we're welcome back to Fit Spec. We don't better change the
Oh,
camera.
what?
So,
We
This
walked
isn't
out in
moving.
that same fucking trail and I can just never see them.
Hold on.
But you have to chase the eagles off and then.
Now we're going.
okay.
Me and I'm looking at him and he's like, oh, let's see, maybe.
Okay.
Welcome back to a Let's Spec here at the Legion Post in Center, Minnesota. With me, I have Charlie Dempewolf back and we have a little camera issue. So, Charlie, would you remember where we were?
Yep. Well, just pressing on. I retired in 1992 from the Navy, and of course had the Vietnam GI Bill. My next step was finishing that degree because it was unfinished business. It was looking back at the real mirror thing, and I'm going, okay, I'm gonna return to that. So I went back to Mankato. This time, Mankato State University. They changed their name, and I got a degree in computer science and a minor in law enforcement, criminal justice. And then I graduated in 1995 from there, and I got my first job after getting my bachelor's degree in Nicollet County. That was just following the tornado over there the same year, and worked at the courthouse over there. I only spent about 3 years, I guess it was, in the computer field, and at that time, the assistant county veteran service officer there, decided to retire from his job, and the county veteran service officer over there, Hank Sadler, asked me if I would put in for Don's job and take the job as the assistant county veteran service officer. And I said, yeah, that sounds good. I said, that's better than crawling underneath desks and computers. So I did that, and got the job there, and 1999, 2000, something like that. And then in 2007, Hank retired from that job, and I was appointed as the county veteran service officer in Nicollet County, and I served as the county veteran service officer until 2016 when I retired from that job. I tell people all the time when I give speeches and stuff, I tell people all the time that it's in terms of vocations, occupations is concerned. I'm the luckiest son of a frog on the face of the earth. I got to fly aircraft on aircraft carriers for 21 years, and then I got to be a county veteran service officer. It is the two best jobs in my life. I'm just very, very fortunate to have that whole thing.
Imagine helping veterans that don't know where to turn. That can be a very fulfilling thing.
That part of it. So it was sort of unexpected. I mean, but to be able to be a part of that, humbly to be able to help those veterans that needed that help and listen to their stories. And it's the same thing that you're doing here with the podcast, is being able to tell those stories and get those veterans to a place where they can have that post-service experience and make it worthwhile. I thank the Lord that He's given the opportunity. And that's the way I look at it, that I was handed an opportunity to come back
So what are you doing these days?
I'm fully retired, and to be quite honest with you, the place that we're sitting in right now, the American Legion Post 108 in the center, occupies an awful lot of my time, but that's okay too. Okay, we are a very large part of the community, not only the veterans experience in the center and in Seward County, but also the community at large. One of the big parts that we do here, as far as I'm concerned, probably one of the most important parts of what we do here is we have very active honor guards and color guards. What that means is we are the military veterans that go to the funeral of veterans that pass away. We are able to do the final military honors for veterans and have the families
Absolutely. I actually, my first assignment on a duty in retail, and I still say it's probably the best. We ended up doing it for 4 months. We were doing, it was a lot of retired guys. And they had one active duty guy getting wounded over in Iraq and shot in the neck. Somebody had heart surgery. Somebody ended up. But you know, you feel the love from the family. You know, they really appreciate us there and do a good job. And you know, that 21 gun salute.
The feedback from the families, their response to it is usually just amazing. We also have probably what I would characterize as probably one of the best. Maybe I'm a little biased, but I think we probably have one of the best honor guards in the state of Minnesota. And there are a lot of Legion and VFW posts, especially in outstate Minnesota. They have a hard time getting maybe 2 or 3 guys to show up for a funeral. We typically turn out anywhere from 15 to 40 for a single funeral. And you got to remember, these are not always veterans that we know very well. It might just be a veteran from the local community that maybe Don Hayden might be aware of them or something like that, but they're not people that we know. We show up because we have to. We show up because it's very important for us to do that, and it's important for the family. And I always tell people that it's also one of those things that you got one shot at it. It's got to be done right. It's got to be done so that the family is happy with the way it's done. You have to pay attention. We take very great pride in the ability of this post to turn out like that. Hey, someone. Very important service for the family.
It is, and the biggest part. I mean, when I did it was we practiced that thing for 2 weeks straight before we even went to a funeral. And I fired those weapons a couple hundred times a day. But when it sounds right, it's a beautiful thing. The families notice, but more so we notice as we're performing the service. But families they really appreciate it.
And you talk about the rifle squad. I'm a Vietnam veteran, but I had to get smart real quick on the M1 Garand, which played a role in Vietnam, but it was a little bit before I got there. But that basically is a weapon that was developed at the end of World War I and was modified and used in World War II. Well, that's what we have for our rifle squad is the M1 Garands. And we've got a real good guy, Jerry Sindel, that's very familiar with the weapons, and I assist him in that effort. Jay is getting involved in it too and helping us with the rifle squad. So
might be here and it might not.
Stuff that there aren't even a lot of post members that are familiar with that gun.
I've never held one.
And they're 100 years old now. They can be temperamental. So we have to make sure they work each and every time we pull a trigger. We want to make sure that it's done right.
Yeah, I should probably get on Jerry's list and get out there and do some of those.
Love to have you.
Yeah, I'll find the time for that. That's an important service.
Okay, well,
where do you want to?
As long as you bring it up, we have a funeral on this Saturday and we're missing one guy.
See what's going on.
Jay?
I'm already there.
Yeah, I know.
No?
Yeah, you're showing up. So.
My weekend's already booked. I've got some guys coming in from out of town. So anyway, yeah.
So that's our this Saturday. That's our last World War II vet. Yes.
Korean War.
Korean War?
Korean War.
No, we thought he was Korean War.
Oh,
We
he's
thought
World
he
War II.
was, but he joined in the early part of '46 when he graduated from high school, and he was in for 2 years. And I'm thinking he's the last World War II that we have. That's Doc Meyer. He was a local veterinarian here in the area, and we're doing honors for him. Here this Saturday, and I'm looking forward to that. I knew Doc, and just about everybody in here did. Doc was one of those guys in
Yeah,
the
that's
whole
right.
community. So,
Now, how long you been around the post 108 Legion? In Lisa?
when my wife and I retired in '92, we moved to the center immediately. But I was involved in the community because I was going to school at Mankato State East full time.
Yep.
So up until the time I graduated, like about 1995, I really didn't have. I belonged to Post 11, and during the Vietnam years and everything, I belonged to Mankato Post 11, and I maintained that membership all the way through when I was going to college in the mid 1990s, and then after I got my degree over there and got my job at Nicollet County and stuff, I just thought, you know what, there's no sense in going to meetings all the way over in Mankato, and I transferred my membership here, and I've been here ever since. And kind of jumped in with both feet. I was a long-time Legion member anyway, but in 1997 and '98, I was the post commander here, and then I want to say it was 99. I can't remember the exact years, but then I did a 1 year as a state or a district vice commander. So I kind of went up to the district level, and I've been involved in it. And then my job as a county veteran service officer, that throws you right back into the mix of the service organization that we do. We have to become certified to do VA claims with the Veterans Administration, and it's the veterans organizations that fund that, and that's how they do their thing. So the veterans organizations are national service organizations, and they are the ones that help us with the claims.
Okay.
So I had to become accredited with the Legion and about 13 others.
Very interesting. What? Yeah. So grew up in this area or close to this area? Or
I was born in Springfield, Minnesota.
Springfield?
Which
Whereabouts
is
is that? Not in
other
Minnesota.
side of New Ulm.
Okay.
So it's Highway 14 on the west side of New Ulm, and I spent through 6th grade there. My family left there in 1962, I want to say it was. Moved to Alexandria, Minnesota, and I graduated from high school from Alexandria in 1969. So always a Minnesotan, but kind of moved around a little bit, and then came here.
Landed in Lee Center.
Yep, and ended up in Low Center. Yep, here I am.
Very cool. Very cool. Let's see. What else? Kids?
Oh, no children.
No children.
Just one of those things. My wife and I never had kids. So we don't have kids or grandkids or anything. It's just my wife and I. And lots of traveling around and stuff. And she really enjoyed that part of the Navy experiences. We spent a lot of time in Jacksonville, Florida, and she had her own career there.
Sure.
And when I retired in '92 and came back here, my wife got a job with Highway Ag, now Ag Partners.
Yeah, I was just in there today.
And she worked for them for 20 years. Is that right? I think it was a full
Well, they have a Hall of Fame in there.
yeah, because she started in '92, and I think she did 20 years there too. So, yep.
Well, supporting the local farmers.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's the smell of money around here.
Yeah.
It's farming is pretty much where it's at. If you aren't a farmer, you have something to do with farming. And
Yeah, well, my day job's a turkey farmer, so I know what the smell of money smells like every day. Yeah, so no kids. Let's see what else. What else you got for us?
well,
Any good?
I think probably the most important thing is what we do as veterans is leaving that legacy. one of the things that I've gotten involved in, just because it's there, is my pet project is the new and upcoming National POW and MIA Memorial Center down at my old base in Florida at Cecil Field, Florida. And that base is closed down. It was what they call BRAC, the Base Realignment Commission and stuff. And so they took Naval Air Station Cecil Field away from the Department of Defense, sold that airfield to the city of Jacksonville, and the city of Jacksonville now owns it, and I think you can call it a private airfield, but it's a commercial airfield now where they do airliner rework. So all of the Delta and Southwest and all of those airlines fly their aircraft in there, and they use the old attack and fighter hangars and the old my community, the old S3 community. Those hangar facilities are all where they do rework with big airplanes.
Is that like hourly maintenance, or are you saying
rework?
rework?
It's rework. Yeah, it's depot, what they call depot level.
Yep.
So they basically tear them apart and put it back together. And one of the things that they did when they did that, made that deal with the city of Jacksonville, is they agreed that the old base chapel at Cecil Field, it's called the Chapel of the High Speed Pass, and that chapel was designated a Florida historic site, so they couldn't do anything with it. They had to keep the grounds and everything, and they turned it into a bunch of my old compatriots, my old wing commander, a bunch of my old squadron COs and XOs and stuff, turned it into the National POW and MIA Memorial Center and Resource Center. So they actually do assist the active duty folks that are out there looking for the missing and so forth. And they have a great museum. The chapel is still active, so people are still, they have funerals there, they have wedding ceremonies and stuff like that. They don't have a pastor or anything, but they kept it as a chapel. And then they have an aircraft display and museum services and historical, and so I'm kind of involved in that down there too. I think that's a legacy that I want to continue.
Yeah, it sounds good.
You know, a lot of people don't realize the number of missing that are still on from all of the wars and conflicts that we have. And it's important that we keep that effort alive, to at least make the effort to look. Every effort we can.
Everyone found you. I mean, that's a family that gets a little closure.
And they are still finding the names and so forth in Vietnam, even Korea, and sometimes even from World War II. So that's kind of one of the things that I consider to be one of my pet projects.
Did you always, you went to basic at 18, and were you always
17?
Or 17? Were you always, was that your goal? I mean, when you were coming through high school, were you always ready to go to the military, or that was kind of the plan?
Yeah, my family history is that we'll start with the older. My grandfather was a World War I vet, and he was he was sent over to France, literally in the trenches of France. And my full name is Charles Alvin Dempewolf Jr. Okay? And so my dad's name is Charles Alvin Dempewolf, but my middle name, Alvin, my grandfather's brother, be my great uncle. My grandfather's brother was Alvin Theodore Dempewolf, and great uncle Alvin was killed in World War I in France. He died in France. He died of the flu in France, and at that time, of course, they didn't have antibiotics and stuff. And what a lot of people don't realize is there were more deaths of Allied forces from the flu in World War I than there was combat deaths. And my great uncle Alvin was a caisson driver, so he drove the sick and the wounded with a horse-drawn caisson between the front and the medical facilities in the rear, and that's what he did for a living. Well, in the course of doing that, he contracted the flu, and he died overseas, and that's who I was named for. And if you if you ever have the opportunity, it's a very, very small building, but if you ever have the opportunity to go to south of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, there's a little town called Harrisburg, South Dakota. And in Harrisburg, South Dakota is the Alvin T. Dempewolf American Legion Post.
Okay.
So
Well, I'll
that's
take a
my,
look. We go
that's my
to
great uncle.
Sturgis every now and then at the South of Sioux Falls.
It's a little bit out of the way, for Sturgis, but
Yeah.
but you can get there.
Go
So
see, make a detour.
that was my grandfather. Then my dad was World War II veteran, Battle of the Bulge. He was in Patton's Third Army, 99th Recon Division, and he was kind of the latter part of the Battle of the Bulge, and was there for the end of the war. And so Army there. So when it came time, and then of course Korea happened in the middle of that, and I was born just before Korea. Got to the Vietnam War, and the answer to your question is yes. I was pretty much, I'm going to, and the Navy part of it, on my mother's side, my uncle Charles, my mother's brother, was a World War II Navy chief.
Still runs it.
And it runs in the family, and he was an electrician's mate, and he retired in 1957. I think he went in 1937 or 38, and he retired in 1957 as a chief, and that was just what I wanted to do.
Yeah, big shoes to
And the
fill.
reason, and I think my dad was a little bit disappointed in the whole not going Army thing, but the reason why I didn't want to do Army is because I had my sights set on aviation. I wanted to do something with airplanes, and at that time during the Vietnam War, getting into the Air Force was nearly impossible.
It was
They
when I
just-
joined too.
You almost had to know somebody to
Yeah.
get in. Okay, so the Navy was the other option, and as long as I could get that aviation guarantee, which I got in 1969, and I got the aviation guarantee, and I went, I'm fat.
Yeah, that's about what I did. I joined in 2011, and I scored really high on the SVAT, but all I said was, just get me in aviation somewhere, and I'm good.
Yeah, get me around airplanes.
Yeah, and it was helicopters for me, but we got a few rides, not as much as you did. But
I loved it. My final flight in the Navy in Bermuda, the commanding officer of Naval Air Station Bermuda said, "Well, Chief, what do you want? What do you want on your way out the door? Anything I can get you on the way out the door?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "I want an island tour in the Huey."
nice.
Me and the Huey pilot, and I said, and that Huey that we had there for SAR purposes at Naval Air Station Bermuda was a Vietnam Huey.
Was it?
It had been, I can't remember where, continent I think, but they got it from. It had hours in
experience.
Vietnam.
Very cool.
So,
yeah.
So I had a lot of fun with that. He wouldn't let me air taxi at Naval Air Station Bermuda because it is an international airport.
Okay.
So he said, "Chief," he said, I'm going to air taxi to the end of the runway. Then you got the airport.
Oh, nice.
Sounds good to me.
Yep.
So he air taxied it to the end of the runway and said, "Chief, you got the airplane." I said, "Thanks a lot." And we were cleared at 300 feet. We were cleared underneath all the airspace and everything. And I did the whole all the way around Bermuda, and we came back. And I was still at 300 feet and like 90 knots or something like that. And I was a lieutenant commander. He was a maintenance officer of the SAR unit that we had there. And he said, "Chief, you're doing a real good job." He said, "You want to take the approach in?" I said, "You got the radios," and I said, "I'll take it in."
Yeah.
And so he called the tower, and the tower cleared us into the approach end of the runway, and I took it in, and I actually air taxied it to the hangar. And he said, "Chief, I'm going to put it down."
Yeah.
Not a problem. I said, "Your airplane."
All right.
And he took it, and he said, that was my final flight in the Navy.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Closest I got to the
was
stick
great.
was a simulator, so, but that was fun too. No, that's a great way to end the Navy career.
I got a bunch of time in Huey's, just doing that. That was how we had to get our flight time in Bermuda. That and the base bird, and none of us wanted to do the base bird because that was boring stuff.
Yeah.
So the Huey was our preferred method of doing it.
Very cool.
Yeah. Yeah, we had a lot of fun.
Yeah. How much time we left here? We got About 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes.
Okay, so I'll tell you another Huey story.
Yeah, I'm all about Huey.
So I don't know. I suppose this was probably like 4 months before I was going to retire, 5 months before I was going to retire, and I had let the flight time. But we had to get 4 hours a month.
Okay.
And so I had kind of let the flight time lapse, and I really needed to get like a few hours, I don't know, probably 2 or 3 or something, just to balance out my logbook so I could get my flight paid. And so I went over and talked to this lieutenant commander over in this SAR unit over in Hangar. And I said, I need some time. You got anything, training missions or anything like that I can sit in the back and just ride along? He looked at me and said, well, Chief, he says, how much time you need? I said, I don't know, I think I probably need a couple of shots at this because I need like about 3.2 or 3.4 or something like that. He says, I tell you what, he says, I got something going out tomorrow and he says, it's only going to be like about 1.5 or 1.6, but he said, I'll write it all off in your logbook if you'll do me a favor. And I went, okay, what's that? And he said, we're doing like a 1.5 tomorrow to do a wet swimmer training. And we need somebody in the water. Great.
Okay.
All right, fine. So I spent the day jumping out of a Huey flying, a flying helicopter. I spent the entire day jumping out into the bay and having 3 wet crewmen pick me up and put me in the airplane, and then I jump back out again, and they pick me up. And they,
Have you ever done that before?
No, but it's not that hard.
Right.
But they had to do, each one of them had to do 3 pickups. There's combat pickup, and we did a couple of those. Those are kind of hard. And then regular straight SAR pickups and stuff. And then there's wet swimmer pickups where they put the wet swimmer in the water with you, and then you just make believe that you're injured.
Yeah.
Okay, so you hang your arms and everything, and then they hook you up and they take you up your and then they also had to do dry pickups. So they would hover over this rock pile at the end of the base, and I had to jump out of a hovering helicopter onto a bunch of rocks, and then wait for them to come around, and each one of these guys had to do 3 pickups to get his balls. So I mean, I was doing this like all day long.
It's more than an hour and a half, right?
No, it didn't take that. It didn't take that much.
Oh no. Okay.
I think we probably did like a 1.6, 1.7, and they got all their quals in.
We're the test dummy.
Yep.
How high were you jumping from?
I was usually when they throw me off into the bay, they would hover at probably about 10 feet. No, it's nothing. It's nothing. Jump out, get wet.
Yeah. Wait for him to come get you.
The fun ones were the combat ones where they would come around and they would flare the airplane, and they had already paid out a whole bunch of the hoist line, and so they would flare the airplane, they toss the hoist to you, and you had to hook up with the D-ring real quick, and then and the harness we had on had just a regular D-ring on it, and they hook up, and then they pick you out of the water.
Oh boy.
So the helo comes in like this, does a flare, then rotates back like that, and when they put, so you only have like about maybe 8 to 10 seconds.
If you miss it, they yell at you, I'm sure.
If you miss it, they come back around and try again. That's part of the training, is for those rescue pickups. It's called a combat rescue. To do that, they have to get that line to the survivor very, very close. Those were in.
See, that would be fun training to me. I think we only got about a minute left on the camera. Let's take a quick 2-second break, and then we'll come back.
Okay, sound good?
All right, and we're back with Charlie Dempewolf. We're finishing up with some search and rescue Huey stories. We're about to an hour. I feel like we could sit here and talk for a long time.
I spent 21 years on active
Yeah.
duty. Where do you want to start?
Yeah,
I can do another one.
Yeah, we'll bring you back for another time. We'll keep it around an hour. Charlie, real quick. Did you enlist first? Or did you start as E1 to you worked up to?
Yeah. When campus graduated from there as an E2, E3 out of A school in Memphis, and all the way up. Like I said, my goal really was in the Navy E7 as the chief petty officer. That's a real big step in the Navy career.
That's so impressive.
There are two more above that. There's E8, E9. There's senior chief petty officer, master chief petty officer, and those would have been very nice to have. But my goal,
And that's what you retired as?
I retired as an E7.
Did you not have any interest in once you graduated college? Or no, you were out by then. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I'm losing track
I
of
would
time.
not have had the opportunity except with the reserves. When I graduated from Mankato State, you could have, but as a retiree, you lose some benefits. So it's usually not.
Right. Okay. Well, Charlie, this has been a pleasure this hour. Like that, eager to went fast. And thank you for your service. Thank you for your continued service after retirement and after your second retirement. Thank you for your service here at the Legion. This has been a lot of fun. Thank you.
I appreciate it, and thank you for your service. And thank you for doing this.
Yeah. Hopefully, we'll get some more time in here or something.
Sure.
All right. Whenever you're ready. And thank you, everybody. And have a great night.
Cool.
Yeah, they don't want that.
It's done.
Yes. And then,